Hello and welcome to this episode of the Women in Streaming Media Education Podcast. I am very excited to be joined by Terri Davies from the Trusted Partner Network. Terri, could you just introduce yourself, although I am sure many people listening to this would already know who you are.
Oh, that's very kind. Hello, I'm Terri Davies. I'm the president of Trusted Partner Network. I'm a Brit. I live in LA for the last 25 years, and I started as a receptionist in the post-production industry in Soho.
That's amazing. I didn't realise you were a Brit, so I just learned something new.
I am a Brit.
Brilliant. Could you tell the audience who maybe don't know what is the Trusted Partner Network and what is their kind of role in our industry? We're here at IBC, obviously. What is it that you do?
So the Trusted Partner Network is wholly owned by the Motion Picture Association. Most people know MPA from the ratings at the end of movies that shows up. And the MPA members are all of the major studios, all 7 of the 8 now, I should say, after Netflix and Amazon joined. And MPA is concerned with anything that the studios can be stronger together for. And security is obviously one of those things. So the Trusted Partner Network works directly with all of the studios. We meet with all of the studios 2-3 times a month to set the MPA best practices as a standard control set. And then we work with the vendors of the studios to put them through a security assessment and make sure that they are as compliant as possible with those best practices. So we have 1,500 vendors in the program now across 60 plus countries. So it's very busy.
Yeah. So obviously women in streaming media, so kind of looking at that streaming angle. When we think about streaming, it's quite fast-paced. We're often under a lot of pressure to scale fast, scale globally. How do we meet those evolving security expectations? What's your kind of take on that streaming angle?
Yes, and you're absolutely right. It's normally when the pace picks up that things like security fall by the
Right
wayside, right?
Yep.
Which can be pretty disastrous. So I think as much as possible, security needs to be by design. You need to design with security in mind, first and foremost. And then I think the other thing with a lot of the streaming platforms is they're not standalone. They have many, many third-party partnerships, and they need to think about security as a whole, right? So all of those different partners who are feeding in data or receiving assets from whatever the digital asset management is, all the way through to play out, they all need to be held to the same standard and held accountable for the same security, because that's key. Because the supply chain, especially for streaming, is only as good as its weakest link.
Yeah. And it's funny you're talking about that kind of speed there. I think that is something that's often really associated with the streaming world, isn't
Yes,
it?
yes.
I mean, we literally have something called fast, so there we go.
Right, and they just, those channels are, I went to a talk this morning about how quickly you can spin up one of those channels. Yes.
So in terms of the Trusted Partner Network then, what would you kind of apply to make sure that someone was meeting those requirements? What does that look like?
So the MPA best practices are a set of nearly 70 controls. We've actually reduced them from 370 something to, because security is associated with being very, very administratively heavy, very onerous. Everyone like, oh my God, security. So we're trying to make it as user-friendly as possible. So we've reduced the number of controls. We've done a number of things in the program so that remediation is very transparent. So typically what happens, 96% of we do hundreds of assessments, and we look at everyone and we have a very good idea of what security looks like in the industry. The scary thing is 96% of the assessments that we do are not fully compliant, which means they have security gaps. And then 90% of the vendors that go through our program are working on pre-release content. So you put the two together, and you realize it's a very serious situation. So the first thing I would say is the MPA best practices that we update regularly working with the studios, looking at new threat intelligence, looking at new technology, because with new technology, the attack surface expands. So pick a set of controls that are standardized. It could be ISO, it could be NIST, it could be SOC 2, it could be MPA. I'm not advocating MPA, I'm saying focus on content security. Pick your control sets, hold yourself accountable to it, understand your risks, and understand your partners' security posture as well. Hold them accountable, because once you have that standard language that everybody's speaking, it becomes much easier to understand what your security posture is and what your gaps are and what you need to do to bring yourself up to where you need to be based on the content that you're dealing with.
Have you got any kind of examples of what that process has looked like for somebody working through it?
So the process for TPN is very straightforward. Before I joined TPN, I was on the vendor side and I went through a TPN assessment, and it took me 4 months to answer the questionnaire, let alone do the security assessment. So we knew that we had to make it much more user-friendly. So we built a platform on which we run the program. Vendor A will join TPN. There is a membership fee. We're a not-for-profit. We have to be self-funding. So there's a membership fee based on annual gross revenue. They come into our platform, they answer a questionnaire, and incidentally, whether they pay us or not, whether they join our membership or not, they can do this questionnaire to get a gap analysis. Because what we want to do is raise the bar, right? Whether they're a member or not. So come in, do a questionnaire, get your gap analysis. Nobody is looking at that apart from you. Then if you decide you want to go ahead and become a TPN member, you work with one of our 60 plus assessors around the world. They will audit your answers to that questionnaire and work with you. We're not in the business of failing anybody. It's not a pass or a fail. We really want to work with that vendor to make them as good as they can be. So our assessor will work with that vendor to say, well, you answered yes to this, but you're actually no. Did you want to change your answer? So there's a real sort of pre-assessment collaboration between the assessor and the vendor. And then when that's done, the assessor will file their findings with us. We QC it. We go backwards and forwards with the assessor if we have questions, and then we publish it. And upon publication, all of the studios who are members of the TPN program can see that assessment report. But we've just actually updated the program because that's where it used to stop. And the reality was people would get their TPN Gold Shield for completing the assessment. But they may have, and I'm being dramatic, 157 open remediation items that the studios would then have to go and look at to make their own independent risk-based decisions. So we've just updated the program to say, actually now, you can now go ahead, remediate all of those open items, we will validate it, and you can achieve a higher shield status going forward, which is great because it gives the vendors a path to really understanding what compliance looks like and a way to demonstrate and differentiate themselves if they really are fully compliant, because that's a tall order, and vendors who do become fully compliant should be able to show off about it, really.
You're providing a lot more transparency as well, aren't you?
That's exactly right, yes. And security needs to be collaborative and transparent. Everybody in the supply chain should know what it is. And those vendors, likewise, they're outsourcing to other vendors. They should know what their vendor's security posture is as well. And what we would advocate, of course, is that everybody uses the MPA best practices, and that's the standardization.
So it feels like there needs to be sort of a little cultural shift there as well, because
yes,
obviously, filling in checklists and people being nervous perhaps about that transparency reflecting on them. How do we kind of build a security first culture inside that streaming industry where I imagine we often see quite a lot of gaps because of that speed we talked about earlier?
I think the first thing is we built the program in a way that you can do your own questionnaire quietly on your own. Nobody sees it, but you get your gap analysis. There's nothing to be afraid of, right? And then that gives you time to work through those gaps. When you're ready, you can do the assessment. And I can tell you from first-hand experience, I just did a panel this morning with a number of the Hollywood studios. And we were talking about the new Shield update and how the studios want to work with their vendors through those gaps. Everybody understands that nobody is going to be perfect out the gate. But as long as we understand what the compensating controls are and what the plan is to get there, that's good enough for a lot of the studios.
Everybody knows where they stand then,
Yes,
don't they?
yes, exactly. Yeah, so it's the content security industry is a small community in this industry. We all know each other. We've all worked at different companies. We've all bringing different perspectives to it. And nobody wants anybody to fail. All we want to do is make the industry stronger. And that's by doing it with transparency and collaboration and support. And to that point,
You're right.
to that point, we actually earlier this year realized about 75% of our members have less than $5 million annual gross revenue. And the reason we know that is our membership is based on annual gross revenue. And while there's nothing wrong with that, that does tell me that they're not going to have a dedicated security team or a dedicated CISO, right? And security is expensive. So earlier this year, we decided that we would make available a lot of free security resources, such as security policy templates, allowing vendors to come in free of charge and do the assessment and get their gap analysis. The MPA content security best practices we translated with IUNO's help, thank you IUNO, to 10 different languages, because the 1,500 vendors that we work with are in 60 plus countries around the world. So a mom and pop visual effects house in Indonesia couldn't possibly be expected to perform at the same level. So we want to help everybody get there. So, keep checking for those free resources. They really are free. You do not need to be a TPN member. You could go and download them today, Polly, if you were interested.
I actually will.
Good, good.
Well, I think, particularly thinking from an education perspective, which is obviously my background, making things more accessible is how we drive change forward.
Yes.
And particularly in something that is so important. You say that the industry wants this to happen. They want the communities on both sides, the vendors and the content makers want to support each other, because actually at the end of the day, that's how we continue to make the money, right?
Yes. So we realize, we have to help. We absolutely have to be in this fight, and we need to do everything that we can, because now we have so much reach and distribution in the industry to all of the players. So we also send out, when very bad things happen, and they do often, we also send out alerts to the industry. Anybody whose email we have will receive an alert from us saying, hey, heads up, this is here, or you need to patch this software, or whatever it might be. So we're constantly trying to do things to help and assist.
I love this conversation. It's so positive.
Oh, good.
So I think sort of wrapping up then, I'd like to look ahead. What do you think the next big security challenge might be, particularly thinking about kind of streaming platforms and what they're facing? Obviously, we have seen some challenges with certain platforms. What does that look like? And
so I think, the first thing I mentioned we update our MPA best practices every year. We've just released a new version 5.3.1 that is strengthening application security. So we're, again, constantly working with the content owners to say, where are the risks? Where do we need to get better? And security is progress over perfection. It's never going to be perfect, and I'm the first to admit that. So we're in this continuous improvement mode. I think a focus on remediation is a new thing. Normally, people just do an assessment and they're done. They've checked the boxes and they move on. This is not the way it's going to be. We want to see remediation progress. And I think Zero Trust is going to play a very, very big part as, application security continues to be important. It's not just moving files anymore. There's APIs to think about and all sorts of manner of application security as well. And that's where I think Zero Trust will come into play. So we are partnered very closely with Movie Labs and their 2030 vision, for example. And in our version 5.3, the prior version, we put the Movie Labs recommended practices in our best practices as well. So going into 2026, I expect us to be very involved in figuring out more free resources, but probably really focusing on educating the industry more on zero trust, right? We ask the question now, do you do zero trust? Everybody says yes. And then once they get into the assessment, they're like, actually, we didn't quite know what it meant. So that tells me we need to do some education in that regard.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I agree that it always, bottom line, comes down to education.
Yes.
Terri, thank you so much for joining us today for this
My pleasure.
very quick whistle-stop tour through what the TPN do and where we are currently at with security in the streaming world. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Polly. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.